First off, the main news is that Russia has expanded its anti-terrorist military action in Syria.
This morning, we used ships from the Caspian flotilla. 4 warships fired 26 missiles, hitting 11 targets. Civilians were not affected. The results of the strikes showed the effectiveness of rockets being fired from long range, approximately 1,500 kilometers.
Well, you heard the details for yourself there. That was Russia's defense minister meeting with President Vladimir Putin just a little earlier on today. RT's Daniel Hawkins with me in the studio now to discuss the developments. There's been a lot coming through in the last hour or so, Dan. But first of all, tell us about that meeting. Put some more details on it for our viewers there between the defense minister Shoigu and Putin earlier on, and those announcements that were made this morning. Certainly, it's really ratcheting up the operation now against ISIL in Syria, isn't it?
Absolutely, Kevin. Well, the details we have, as we heard there, this operation has been launched from Russian Navy in the Caspian Sea. There's 4 vessels, according to Defense Minister, that have launched at least 26 missiles targeting a total of 11 terrorist positions. These are, as we said earlier, high-precision, laser-guided, television-guided missiles, and they've been launched from a distance of almost 1,500 kilometers away, and according to Defense Minister, they all successfully hit those targets. And this really marks an escalation in this conflict. Of course, there's 3 theatres of war ultimately, in the air, on ground and in the sea. We know Russian troops, according to the MOD, will not be going in on the ground. They already have launched airstrikes. This means that that 3rd operational theatre has now been opened in this fight against ISIS. So really, some really interesting news here.
And a lot more, well, talking of interesting news, a lot more news coming in today, a lot more people using the word cooperation. Russia certainly calling for cooperation. There's been an interesting turn of events that we're hearing now that China has said, this is yet to be officially confirmed, but China's saying it's ready to join the anti-ISIL operation in Syria. And we're also hearing that Iraq, it hasn't done it officially, but that Iraq Defense Committee chairman saying that they want to see a bigger role for Russia than the Americans, and maybe airstrikes against Islamic State on their territory too. Now, that hasn't been officially called for yet, but it's certainly something that's being mooted around today. Cooperation seems to be the watchword, doesn't it? Putin says Hollande is suggesting as well, French President Hollande suggesting an alliance against Assad as well. The latest we hear is that Putin is saying the calls have been put out to these various alliances, these various people that could cooperate. They're waiting for the calls back, but certainly a lot more talk about that today.
Absolutely. Well, Putin has made it clear from the very start that any coalition aimed at fighting back ISIS will not simply function without the cooperation of states within the region of Turkey, of Saudi Arabia, of Iran, ultimately Iraq, of course, which is facing its own very difficult battle against ISIS. So, as we say, details still sketchy coming in here. But certainly, if this information is correct, and we can see a joint front between the Russian military, the Iraqi army, Iraqi government, and also now we're hearing China. Also, those border issues with the Russian jets accused of violating Turkey's airspace. We've had.
Yeah, there's been development there. You're right, Dan. Sergei Shoigu saying that they're coordinating work with their Turkish partners so that no further accidental incursion incidents, as we saw over the weekend, will happen again. So it looks like they're certainly working together to try and avert any potential problems there. Interesting, Sergei Shoigu also said today they're discussing with their American partners, again, they're waiting for a response, details of joint work providing security in Syria. So again, this all going back to more cooperation and a united front against ISIL. Now, it looks like it's heading that way, doesn't it? Especially if China comes on board, of course.
Absolutely. I mean, this has been on the table of discussion for quite some time now, and there's been a lot of back and forth diplomatic negotiations between the US, which obviously has its own military operation in the air, largely in western Syria, and Russia operating in eastern and northern Syria, as we saw yesterday in Idlib province and over just further west of Palmyra. So certainly, if these do manage to coordinate, that will certainly have a large impact on beating back those ISIS militants.
Russia's still adamant, of course, there will be no ground operation, but increasingly Russia as such a kingpin here in linking this whole operation together against ISIL in Syria, isn't it? And maybe in Iraq now, if that official call comes forward to Russia later on today, it may well do. It's certainly being vaunted that it might happen to officially request Russian help, Russian airstrikes on Iraqi territory against ISIL.